Jesus Hibbs had a $4,000 debt, a sleeping daughter at home, and exactly 14 minutes to reach the skyscraper that would save them both, until he saw a woman whose desperation matched his own, standing on the edge of a highway that felt like a graveyard for dreams. The air in Jesus' sedan smelled like dollar store cologne, mixed with the kind of anxiety that makes your chest tight. He'd been practicing his elevator pitch in the rearview mirror for the past 20 minutes, adjusting a tie that was slightly frayed at the edges, a tie he borrowed from his late father-in-law's closet because he couldn't afford a new one. His phone pinged with a calendar alert that made his stomach drop. Final interview. Do not be late. This wasn't just a job interview. This was the difference between keeping his daughter in her school, in her home, in her life, or watching everything crumble because he couldn't make rent for the third consecutive month. Before we continue, please tell us where in the world you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories travel, and it reminds us that hope and second chances are universal languages. At 5 a.m. that morning, Jesus had ironed his shirt with a pot of boiling water because his iron had died 2 weeks earlier, and he couldn't justify spending $15 when that money could buy his daughter, Maya, 3 more school lunches. The shirt came out wrinkled anyway, but he told himself it added character. That's what you do when you're broke. You rebrand your failures as personality traits. He'd walked into Maya's room before leaving and kissed her forehead while she slept. She'd kicked off her blankets again. She always did. And he pulled them back up to her chin, in his pocket. He carried a small plastic green dinosaur, a gift she'd given him last Christmas wrapped in newspaper because they couldn't afford wrapping paper. She'd said it was for good luck. He needed all the luck he could get. The job was for a senior logistics coordinator at Ackerman Global, one of the most prestigious firms in the city. The salary was $78,000 a year, more money than Jesus had ever made in his entire life. It would mean health insurance for Maya. It would mean fixing the leak in their ceiling. It would mean he could finally stop choosing between electricity and groceries. He'd made it through 3 rounds of interviews. He'd beaten out 200 other candidates. The final interview was just a formality. They'd said, show up on time, be professional, and the job was his. Simple, achievable, life-changing. That's why when he saw the woman standing next to the broken-down SUV, his first instinct was to look away. His GPS said he had 14 minutes to cover 11 miles. That was doable. That was safe. That was survival. But then he made the mistake of looking at her face. She looked the way his wife had looked 6 years ago when her car had broken down on I-85 and 17 cars passed her by. When she'd finally gotten help, it was too late. She'd been standing in 95-degree heat for 2 hours and suffered heat exhaustion that triggered the medical emergency that would eventually take her life. The doctor said if someone had stopped sooner, if someone had just cared enough to help, she might have survived. Jesus' hands were shaking as he pressed the brake pedal. What are you doing? His brain screamed. You're going to lose everything. But his heart, that stubborn, stupid muscle, was already making decisions his logic couldn't override. He pulled onto the shoulder 50 feet ahead of her and put the car in reverse. Nicole Ackerman watched the sedan back up and thought to herself, this is the one. She'd been standing on this highway for 47 minutes. 12 cars had passed. 12 people had chosen their schedules over her safety. But this man with the frayed tie and the haunted eyes, had chosen differently. Thank you, she said as Jesus stepped out of his car. Her voice cracked slightly. Thank you so much. My phone has no service out here, and I didn't know what to do. Jesus didn't respond immediately. He was looking at the shredded tire and the seized lug nut that wouldn't budge. His mind was calculating the cost of every second, but his hands were already reaching for his tire iron. "I've got it," he said, though he wasn't sure he did. The lug nut was rusted solid. He positioned the iron and pushed with everything he had. Nothing. He tried again, bracing his foot against the car frame for leverage. His hand slipped, and he gashed his palm open on the metal edge. Blood welled up immediately, mixing with the road dust on his skin. "Oh, my God, you're bleeding," Nicole said, moving toward him. "We should stop. We can call." "There's no service," Jesus interrupted, wrapping his hand in his shirt. "And I'm not leaving you here." 23 minutes later, he had the spare tire on. His suit was destroyed. His hands looked like he'd been working on an engine for 6 hours. His white shirt was gray with road dirt and spotted with blood. He checked her oil. It was low. So he poured in the quart he kept in his trunk for emergencies. He checked her brake fluid. He even looked at her air filter. "Why are you doing all this?" Nicole asked, her voice soft. "You don't know me." Jesus wiped his forehead with the back of his wrist, leaving a streak of grease across his temple. "Because I know what it's like to be invisible," he said. "I know what it feels like when the world just drives past you like you don't matter." He pulled out his phone. 5:17 p.m. The interview had started 2 minutes ago. He was 22 minutes away. The job was gone. His daughter's stability was gone. The apartment was gone. Everything he'd been fighting for had just evaporated on this empty stretch of highway. Nicole saw him staring at his phone. "Are you late for something?" Jesus felt something break inside his chest. Not his heart. That was still beating. But some last thread of hope that maybe, just maybe, the universe would reward good people. He laughed, but it sounded more like a sob. "Yeah, I was late for the most important thing that's ever happened to me." "I'm so sorry," Nicole whispered. "Give me your number. Let me help you. Let me make this right." Jesus shook his head. "Just pay it forward to someone who looks like they're drowning. That's all I ask." He got back in his car without another word. In his rear-view mirror, he saw Nicole standing there, barefoot on the highway, watching him drive away with an expression of intense, calculated curiosity that he couldn't quite understand. But he didn't have time to think about it, because he was about to walk into the building that would humiliate him in ways he hadn't imagined possible. Listen, if you made it this far in the story, you're invested. You want to know what happens next. But here's the thing. Most people scroll past these stories without subscribing. They watch, they enjoy, and they disappear. If this story matters to you, if you actually care how it ends, hit that subscribe button, please. It takes 2 seconds. And if you don't, you'll probably forget about this channel and never hear any other amazing stories from me. The lobby of Ackerman Global looked like it had been designed to intimidate poor people. Everything was marble and glass and chrome. The security guard at the desk wore a suit that probably cost more than Jesus' entire wardrobe. When Jesus walked through the revolving doors looking like he just crawled out of a mechanic's garage, the guard's face shifted from professional neutrality to open contempt in less than a second. "Can I help you?" The guard's tone made it clear that helping was the last thing he wanted to do. "I have an interview," Jesus said. His voice sounded small in the cavernous space. "I'm late, I know, but there was an emergency. If I could just speak to someone in HR." "Name." "Jesus Hibbs." The guard typed slowly, deliberately wasting time. His eyes flicked up to Jesus' ruined clothes, then back to his screen. "Says here your interview was at 5 p.m. It's 5:43. You missed it." "I know, but if you could just call up." I can't just call up. This is a professional organization. You think you can just show up whenever you want looking like that? The guard gestured vaguely at Jesus' entire existence. Something hot and sharp flared in Jesus' chest. 6 years of struggling. 6 years of being looked at exactly like this. Like he was less than human because he couldn't afford to be clean. Listen to me. I helped someone on the highway. Her car broke down. I couldn't just leave her there. That's a great story. But this is business. You want my advice? Learn to manage your time better. Now, please leave before I have to make you leave. Jesus felt the dinosaur in his pocket, that stupid little toy his daughter had given him. He thought about going home and explaining to her why they had to move, why she had to change schools, why Daddy had failed again. He was about to turn around when a voice crackled over the security desk intercom. Send him up? The guard's face went pale. Sir, he's... Send him up. Jesus stepped into the elevator with his heart hammering, so hard he thought it might crack his ribs. The doors closed. The elevator rose. And with every floor, he felt like he was ascending toward either salvation or execution. He didn't know which, but he was about to find out. The elevator doors opened onto the 23rd floor, revealing a reception area that looked like it belonged in an art museum. A woman with severe cheekbones and an ice blue pantsuit gestured toward a pair of double doors. They're waiting for you. Jesus' stomach dropped. He'd thought this would be a one-on-one interview. He prepared for a conversation across a desk, maybe 2 people at most. But the way she said they implied something much larger, much more terrifying. He pushed open the doors and stepped into a boardroom that could have held 50 people. But there were only 8 people seated around a table that looked like it cost more than his car. 7 executives in suits that probably had their names stitched inside the collars. And at the head of the table, Nicole. Jesus' brain short-circuited. Nicole Ackerman, the woman from the highway. She wasn't wearing the white dress anymore. She wore a charcoal blazer, and her hair was pulled back. She looked powerful, dangerous, and she wasn't smiling. Mr. Hibbs, she said. Her voice was different now, colder, sharper. Thank you for joining us. Though I note you're 47 minutes late. Jesus couldn't speak. His mind was racing through possibilities. This was a test. This had to be a test. But what kind of test makes you destroy your chances at employment? Let me explain what you walked into, Nicole continued. Today, we conduct a rather unorthodox evaluation of our final candidates. We staged 12 identical scenarios across the city. 12 stranded drivers with 12 final round interviews scheduled at precise times. The test was simple. Would you stop to help a stranger if it meant jeopardizing your professional future? Jesus' hands were shaking. This was fake? All of it. The breakdown was real. The flat tire was real. Your choice was real. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. 11 candidates drove past. You were the only one who stopped. One of the other executives, a man with silver hair, an expression like he'd just bit into a lemon, leaned forward. Which is admirable, Mr. Hibbs. Truly. But let's discuss the reality of business. You missed a multi-million-dollar deadline simulation. In our world, compassion is a luxury we can't afford. If this had been a real client emergency, your decision would cost us significant revenue. Another executive, a woman with glasses that reflected the dying light from the windows, added, "We value integrity, but we also value results. You prove you have a good heart. But in this industry, a good heart without strategic thinking is a liability." Jesus felt something shift inside him. All his life, he'd been made to feel small, too poor, too uneducated, too emotional. He'd spent 6 years apologizing for being broke, for struggling, for existing in spaces where he didn't fit. But standing here, covered in road grime and blood, something inside him refused to bend anymore. You want to know what I think? His voice came out stronger than he expected. I think this is the most messed up hiring process I've ever seen. The room went silent. Nicole's eyebrow arched slightly. Jesus continued, his words coming faster now. You set up a test where the right answer was to ignore someone in distress. You created a situation where basic human decency is classified as a failure. And now you're sitting here, in your expensive suits, in your expensive building, telling me that compassion is a liability? The silver-haired executive's face turned red. Mr. Hibbs, I don't think you understand. No, you don't understand. Jesus took a step forward, his daughter's dinosaur pressed against his leg, through his pocket. That woman on the highway, in your test or not, was alone, vulnerable. If I had been a 12th car to pass her, if everyone had chosen their careers over her safety, what kind of world would we be living in? He looked directly at Nicole. If a company thinks a deadline is more important than a human life stranded on a highway, then I'm not the one who failed this interview. You are. He turned toward the door. He'd walk out of here with nothing except the knowledge that he'd stayed true to who he was. Maybe that was worth more than $78,000 a year. Maybe his daughter would be proud of him for... The sound of clapping stopped him mid-step. Nicole was standing, applauding slowly, then faster. The other executives looked confused, but one by one, they stood too. The silver-haired man looked like he'd just swallowed glass, but even he was nodding slightly. Sit down, Mr. Hibbs, Nicole said, and now she was smiling, really smiling, because we need to discuss what you were actually interviewing for. Jesus didn't sit. He couldn't. His legs felt like they'd been welded in place. Nicole walked around the table toward him, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. In her hand, she held a folder. The position of senior logistics coordinator was filled 3 weeks ago, she said. We never needed someone for that role. What we needed, what we've been searching for desperately for 6 months, is a chief of ethics and culture. She opened a folder and showed him a job description. Jesus's eyes scanned the words, but they didn't make sense. Director-level position, $140,000 annual salary, health benefits, education stipend for dependents. We don't need someone who can move shipments efficiently, Nicole continued. We have algorithms and AI for that. What we need is someone who can ensure that when we grow, we don't lose our humanity in the process. Someone who understands that business is ultimately about people, not profit margins. The silver-haired executive, who Jesus now noticed was wiping his eyes slightly, spoke up. I voted against this hiring method. I thought it was manipulative and cruel, but Ms. Ackerman insisted. And she was right. In 3 hours, we learned more about your character than we could have discovered in 3 months of traditional interviews. Jesus shook his head. I'm not educated enough for this. I have a high school diploma and half a community college degree. I work in warehouses. I drive forklifts. I'm not. You're exactly what we need, Nicole interrupted. Do you know how many Harvard graduates applied for this position? How many people with MBAs and corporate experience wanted this role? Dozens. And every single one of them drove past our test. Every single one. She stepped closer. You know what that told me? That traditional education doesn't teach integrity. That corporate experience doesn't guarantee conscience. I needed someone who had been on the other side, someone who knew what it felt like to be overlooked, undervalued, dismissed. Someone who would never let this company become the kind of place that drives past people in need. Jesus' eyes filled with tears. He thought about his daughter, about the plastic dinosaur in his pocket, about his wife who had died on a highway while people drove past, about all the times he'd been made to feel invisible because he couldn't afford to be seen. "There's one condition," Nicole said. "Your first project is to review our entire hiring process and recommend changes. I want you to build a system that finds more people like you, people who choose right over easy, even when no one's watching." Jesus picked up the pen. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely write, but he signed his name on the contract. Jesus Hibbs, Chief of Ethics and Culture. The words looked foreign and impossible and perfect. "Can I ask you something?" he said, his voice breaking. "What would you have done if I hadn't stopped? If I'd driven past like everyone else?" Nicole smiled. "Then I would have kept testing until I found someone who didn't, because I believe those people exist, and I believe they're worth finding." 2 weeks later, Jesus picked up his daughter from school in a new car. Nothing fancy, just reliable. He was wearing a suit that actually fit. As they drove home to their new apartment, Maya held up a drawing she'd made in art class. It was of a man changing a tire on a highway with the sun setting behind him. "My teacher said we had to draw someone being a hero," she explained. "I drew you." Jesus pulled the car over and hugged her until she squirmed and laughed and told him he was being weird. But he didn't care, because he'd learned something that would stay with him forever. The world tests your integrity when it's most inconvenient to keep it. Professional skills can be printed on a resume, but character is written in the moments when no one, or everyone, is watching. Never trade your humanity for a seat at a table where you have to leave your soul at the door. The job you get by being yourself is the only job worth having. So here's the real question. Did you subscribe yet? Thousands of people will listen to this story and won't subscribe. Please don't be that person. Kindly support what I do here by subscribing, and then drop in the comment section what story you'd like to hear next. Should I cover more stories about unexpected tests of character? Let me know if you want to hear more stories like this. Before we wrap up, I need to share something with you that Jesus' story teaches us, something that goes beyond just a feel-good ending. What Jesus experienced on that highway is what I call the echo principle, and understanding it might change how you make decisions for the rest of your life. Here's what it means. Every choice you make when no one is watching creates an echo that eventually comes back to you, not in some mystical, karma is magic way, but in a very real, very practical sense. Think about it. Jesus could have driven past Nicole. 99% of people would have. He had every logical reason to keep going. A daughter depending on him. Rent he couldn't pay. A future hanging by a thread. The smart decision, the strategic decision, would have been to protect his interview at all costs. But here's what most people don't understand about integrity. It's not about being rewarded. Jesus didn't stop because he thought he'd get something out of it. He stopped because years earlier, 17 people had driven past his dying wife, and he'd made a promise to himself that he would never be the person who looks away. That's the first part of the echo principle. Your character is built in moments when convenience and conscience collide. Who you are isn't determined by what you do when people are watching or when the outcome is guaranteed. It's determined by what you do when stopping costs you everything, and no one would blame you for driving past. Now here's the second part, and this is critical. The world is always testing you, even when you don't know you're being tested. Nicole's test was deliberate, but most of life's tests aren't. Most of the time, you won't know that the person you help in the grocery store is your future boss's mother. You won't know that the colleague you defend will one day be in a position to hire you. You won't know that the stranger you're kind to is connected to an opportunity you can't even imagine yet. But here's the truth. It doesn't matter if they are or aren't, because the real test isn't about what you get back. The real test is whether you're willing to do what's right when doing what's wrong would be easier, faster, and more profitable. Let me give you 3 practical takeaways from Jesus' story that you can apply to your own life. First, never sacrifice your integrity for urgency. Jesus had 14 minutes to change his life, but he had a lifetime to live with who he was. Deadlines come and go. Job offers come and go. But once you've driven past someone who needed help because it wasn't convenient, you can't unhear that voice in your head asking, "What kind of person am I becoming?" Second, your struggles don't disqualify you. They prepare you. Jesus thought his poverty, his lack of education, his blue-collar background made him inadequate. But those experiences were exactly what made him valuable. The time you spent being overlooked teaches you to see other people who are being overlooked. The time you spent struggling teaches you empathy that no MBA program can provide. Third, the table you get to buy pretending to be someone else will never feel like home. Jesus could have lied about why he was late. He could have made up an excuse. He could have swallowed his conviction and agreed that compassion was a liability. But then he would have gotten a job he had to maintain by being someone he wasn't. The most exhausting thing in the world is getting opportunities you have to fake your way through. Here's my challenge to you. This week, you're going to face a moment where doing the right thing costs you something. Maybe it's time. Maybe it's money. Maybe it's just the comfort of not getting involved. And in that moment, you're going to have a choice. You can drive past. You can protect your schedule, your convenience, your comfort. No one will blame you. No one might even know. Or you can stop, not because you'll be rewarded, not because someone is watching, but because you decided that the person you're becoming matters more than the opportunities you might miss. The echo principle isn't a guarantee that good things happen to good people. Life doesn't work that way. Jesus could have stopped on that highway and still lost everything. Nicole's test could have been real bad luck instead of a deliberate evaluation. But here's what is guaranteed. Every time you choose character over convenience, you become a little more the person you want to be. Every time you stop when it's easier to drive past, you're investing in an identity that no job, no salary, no title can give you. And here's the beautiful paradox. The people worth working for, worth knowing, worth building a life with, they're looking for exactly that. They're looking for people who stop on highways, who help when it's inconvenient, who choose right over easy, not because it pays, but because it's who they are. So the next time you're faced with a choice between your deadline and someone's dignity, between your convenience and someone's crisis, ask yourself, what kind of echo do I want to create? Because that echo will come back to you. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but it will come back. And when it does, you'll be glad you stopped.